class. I hope you all are enjoying Troilus and Cressida. We're now approaching the last couple parts, and also towards the end of the semester now. And the big thing that we need to be thinking about is getting our papers done. Your outline is due this week. I'm not going to give you any specific formatting. I would like to have like the MLA header with your name and my name and the class and the date and page numbers, especially if you go over on multiple pages. The outline doesn't have to be double spaced. If you want to, that's fine. You also don't have to do complete sentences. It can just be kind of central ideas. If you are using some of the sources from the class, some of the links or anything like that, please indicate where you think you might use those. Remember, this is going to be a 5 to 10 page paper, so it's a little longer paper, not super long, but a little longer. And so you will need a slightly more detailed outline. Anyway, but any information you think you need to provide for me on there would be appreciated. And a lot of you haven't turned in your Middle English recitations. I would go ahead and get onto that because late grades accrue at 10 points a day. So I definitely would advise you go ahead and get busy with all that. And just a reminder that the final test will be an essay test. I'll probably give you 2 or 3 possible essay questions, and you'll pick one. And it'll be an essay test over Troilus and Cressida. And the Parliament of Fowls, potentially. Anyway, not the Canterbury Tales, just Troilus and Cressida and the Parliament of Fowls. But to go back to the story, there's a lot more action in a way in this book, book 4, because we actually have a battle occurring. And in this battle, we also see Troilus being, kind of our heroic knightly knight now. We finally see him really acting like the knight that he's supposed to be. We see actually a lot of the heroes of the Trojan War. If you've ever read Homer's Iliad or Odyssey, he of course recounts all of those figures. Hector, Helen, Priam. They appear in this story. And, what's interesting though is with the battle and all going on, we also have Calchas, which is Cressida's father, who has gone over to the Greeks, has requested that she be given over to him and the Greeks. And Hector is considering this matter. And he tries to consider it very thoughtfully. Of course, the final decision is that she will be given over. And, of course, this is very troublesome to Troilus and also to Cressida. This is one of the few books where we see her really very openly, finally, it seems, maybe showing some love for Troilus. She does talk like she's upset at being separated from him, and they make plans for, after her being sent, how she'll return. And they talk about these things, and so they make those plans. Of course, Pandarus, when they're talking about all this, and Troilus is getting very upset at her having to be sent away, Pandarus says, things like, "There's other fish in the sea. Don't worry yourself so much about this." And being as we would think he would be, he just doesn't play quite as big a role in the romance here, though, as he has in previous books. We see his influence start to wane, and we see kind of a focus on how do I say this? The real kind of star-crossed lover theme, the idea of fate and the sadness of both Troilus and Cressida in these final books, but especially kind of in book 4. And of course, Troilus has always been a relatively sensitive, emotional sort throughout this text, but Cressida has seemed to be a little more removed or distant, kind of guarding her position, because she does know how kind of precarious her position is in Troy because of her father's defection. And so she's tried to be careful through this whole thing, pushed in probably a little more aggressively than she wished to in the whole relationship. Nonetheless, it has been consummated, and she has kind of really come to feel some affection for Troilus. And we do have, at the beginning of book 4, we have this, we again have the invocation of the muse, but in this instance, it's an invocation of fortune. And the reason why we're invoking fortune again is pointing back to that idea of the star-crossed unhappy lovers. Because, very quickly, just like he's kind of done, the narrator throughout the book has done, he points out that this is going to end badly. That Cressida is going away and she's not coming back. And that this is an issue where it's just not going to end well. It's not a happy love story. And we are reminded of that in this book again when we're in the very first few lines. And that's just something, it's kind of like Romeo and Juliet again. Very similar story. But one that we're more familiar with. And, it's just this kind of very traditional motif of unrequited love in a way. Maybe not entirely unrequited in the sense that they do get to be together for a while, but it just doesn't end well for them in other ways. So these are all ideas that we need to focus on in book 4. One of the things I kind of thought for this week, since I've kind of been using Troilus and Cressida to talk about some of the interesting things going on in the Middle Ages, including things like letter writing, which we covered, and those sorts of things, I thought that this week we'd talk a little more about medieval warfare. Online, you will see some links to, for instance, the Battle of Poitiers, which was a fairly contemporary battle with Chaucer. It's during the 100 Years' War, which Chaucer lived during the 100 Years' War, a war between England and France. And it's the English trying to claim kind of the northern part, and they wouldn't even mind all of France. And the French, of course, trying to kick the English out and claim all of France, since that happens to be where they live. Anyway, and that's the 100 Years' War. It's a lot more complicated than that, but that's the general idea, and there's quite a bit of just skirmishing back and forth over a number of years, with this being kind of the primary issue. The English trying to grab land, somewhat based on a loose marriage claim of kinship, like what land that they can claim there in France, and then the French themselves. Oh, excuse me. The French themselves trying to say the opposite, say that the English have no real claim. And of course you have, if you've ever heard of Eleanor of Aquitaine. Well, Aquitaine is in the northern part of France. And it's through that, actually, that union, that we see the kind of the truces and the treaties that England has quite a foothold in France when the war starts, but they try and take over most all of France and make the English king of France and England. Just doesn't work out in the end. Joan of Arc is kind of part of that whole story. But again, we kind of see how the battle goes, some of the battles go. The Battle of Poitiers, the English win, even though the French win ultimately. The English win the Battle of Poitiers, and the longbow has a lot to do with the winning of that battle. Not everything, because battles are won by more than one unit of any army, but it does have quite a bit to do with the outcome of this battle. And so if you'll just kind of read through some of that stuff and note some of the interesting back and forth that's going on in the military exchange in Book 4. Again, it should somewhat imitate what we see in The Knight's Tale. If we think back and we think about the Trojan War itself, of course people didn't fight like that. But again, in the Middle Ages, whether it was historically or accurate or not was not the point. They would just place the stories in their own time and use fighting methods they were familiar with. And so we see the honoring of kind of a more knightly style of fighting. We in particular see kind of a focus on the one-on-one combat between knights. especially, horseback and armor and all that sort of thing. And that just wasn't the case, obviously, in Troy at the time. But again, it's just something that people would do. So we can kind of see, it's really also important to understand the difference between what was literary depictions of war, which are really focused on kind of the aristocratic class, and real depictions of war. Again, if you'll read that Battle of Poitiers, you see what an important role yeomen, not knights, yeomen and regular foot soldiers play in the battle, and that there's quite a few more of them than there actually are the aristocratic knights, even though literarily battle scenes often focus on the interactions between knights and the aristocratic fighters. They're the heroes. So that's just kind of one of the things. I do also have, because we see Hector much more clearly in this book, I thought we would look at some other leaders at the time, Richard the Lionheart and Saladin, who were both real leaders, quite honorable, well regarded in their times. Saladin especially, who was Muslim and who did take Jerusalem back after the Crusades had come in and taken over Jerusalem. Saladin takes it back for the Muslim armies, but he's actually well regarded by the Europeans because he does allow Europeans to still make pilgrimages to Jerusalem. He doesn't just go in and kill all the Christians or anything like that. So he's actually regarded as being quite kind and considerate of Christians and their desires to go to the Holy Land. Anyway, so it's just some interesting historical things we're covering a little more this week as it winds down. As we wind down a little bit, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.